Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to be going into the book of Amos, the 3rd chapter, as continuing, right, as we see Amos began with the judgments, right, that he was pronouncing against the neighboring nations of Israel and Judah, and then eventually turning the focus on to be on Israel and Judah, right? And so leading into the 3rd chapter here, the Lord starts to, by Amos, hone in a bit more and focus on the judgments, right, that'll come upon Israel. And then he specifies why, right? It's like, to a parent that finds their child amongst a group of delinquents doing bad things. Now, in the moment, they might reprove everybody, but it's their child who gets the worst because they get reproved then and there, but they also get sent home, and then they get the real punishment. All right. So this is the book of Amos, chapter 3, verse 1. Hear this word that the Lord Yahweh hath spoken against you, O children of Israel, against the whole family which I brought up from the land of Egypt, saying, You only have I known of all the families of the earth. Therefore I will punish you for all your iniquities. And likewise, when you go back into the book of Exodus, right, it's mainly about the deliverance of the children of Israel, right, from ancient Egypt through the wilderness, and as you keep on reading through the various chapters into the promised land. So that's who the Lord is addressing here via the mouth of Amos. Can two walk together except they be agreed, right? To say, like, if you have a disagreement with somebody, you guys are going to butt heads. You're not going to basically be aligned, okay, unless you're agreed on something. And that's why, like, one example, even in a literal sense, you're walking with somebody, you have an argument, it gets heated, it gets sharp. What ends up happening? You split, right? You go separate ways, because there's a disagreement there, right? And a sharp contention. Will a lion roar in the forest when he hath no prey? Will a young lion cry out of his den if he have taken nothing? And these are like rhetorical questions, right? As Amos is painting a picture here to lead into the point. Can a bird fall in a snare upon the earth where no gin is for him? And the gin being the bait, right? So when you set a bird trap, a bird is not going to come into the trap if there's no bait, right? The bait is what attracts the bird. So once again, it's rhetorical. Shall one take up a snare from the earth and have nothing at all? So what individual sets a trap and then they come and they see there's nothing in there and they still just undo the trap and take it home as though they caught something in there? Nobody does that, right? You wait until you get you catch something in there. Verse 6, shall a trumpet be blown in the city, and the people not be afraid? And that trumpet in this sense is going into like the alarm, right? Because for various events and occasions, you had different, either the trumpet would sound differently, or the amount of times it would be blown would be different. But it was to indicate to the people, say, for example, if you hear 3 horns or 3, rounds of the trumpet go off and that's it, then that means this. If you hear like a continuous boo, 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 beep, 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 all that, and then it means this, right? Or just one long sound of the trumpet, then that means this. So here you can imagine it's more so if a watchman was to see, some threat coming towards the city, the alarms would be rang, the trumpet would be sounded, it would be blown, and people would be afraid, right? Shall there be evil in a city, and the Lord Yahweh hath not done it? And even that is rhetorical, right? Because when we read the scriptures, at least with understanding, you come to find out that evil and good come of the Lord. So no evil happens without the Lord sanctioning it. Surely the Lord God will do nothing but he revealeth his secret unto his servants, the prophets. And what Amos is saying here is not that the Lord doesn't do anything at all, but what this means is that before the Lord does anything, he reveals his secret, which is usually something he's about to do, and it's a secret because nobody else knows it. He reveals that unto his servants, the prophets, and they come and warn the people. The lion hath roared, who will not fear? The Lord Yahweh hath spoken, who can but prophesy? Okay, so after all those questions, he's saying, well, now the lion is roaring, right? Metaphorically, and the Lord has spoken, right? So who can resist his will, right? Who can resist publishing the word of the Lord? Hence, Amos is here doing what he is doing. Publish in the palaces of Ashdod, and in the palaces in the land of Egypt, and say, assemble yourselves upon the mountains of Samaria, and behold the great tumults in the midst thereof, and the oppressed in the midst thereof. Which is to say, basically, come and bear witness, right? Assemble yourselves upon the mountains of Samaria. Come, all you neighbor nations, come over here and come and see the violence, right? The tumults, the violence, the destruction, and the oppression that's going on in this land over here. For they know not to do right, saith the Lord Yahweh, who store up violence and robbery in their palaces, right? And so the things they do and meditate upon are far from righteousness, and the riches and the stuff they gain, which they store up, is from violence and robbery, bribes, unjust deeds, respecting of persons, and they use that and they live like everything is all good. Therefore, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, an adversary shall be even round about the land, and he shall bring down thy strength from thee, and thy palaces shall be spoiled. Now, we know, right, going back to the time of the prophet Amos, if we go back and pull up that timeline here, let's go to the chronological map. So if we go here and we find Amos. All right, so Amos is over here. And right around the time of Amos, let me also pull up another timeline. Let's use, no, not this one. Is it this? No. There's a different one if I can find it. Maps and images. Let's take a look there. Let's see. Yeah, there was one that I pulled up earlier. I'm just trying to see if I can find where it is. Charts and outlines. A lot of good resources here. Yeah, well, maybe I'll be able to find it later. But long story short, what we got over here? What do they have for Amos? Kind of curious here. 19 images. Oh, these are just... this is a good one. This is what I was looking for, actually. Beautiful. Cool. So when we zoom in on here, and we go to the prophet Amos, which is right around here. Cool. So they place him right around 760, so on, right? So at this point, the primary foe or the primary threat in terms of like an empire are the Assyrians, right? Or the right around the Neo-Assyrian Empire. So they would be the ones ultimately, right? Because remember, the subject matter is Samaria, okay, and that was like the capital of the Northern Kingdom. So they're the subject matter here, and as we see in history, when Amos mentions that they shall be even round about the land, that was the siege, right? They surround the city or the land, and they cut off anything going in or going out until you give up or they break in, whatever the case is. So ultimately, that's what ended up happening, right? It did. Now, when you go back to the timeline and you look at the time of Amos, right? There we go. The time of the Northern Kingdom falling came after Amos prophesied, right? 722 officially, like around then it fell. And then Amos, his time, as we see, from like 760 to 753. So in terms of, I believe this is probably the time of yeah, listed by dates of ministry of his ministering. Now, whether he was actually alive at that time or not, probably not, because I believe the last king of the northern kingdom was Hoshea. So, I mean, all in all, the point is the ultimate foe that the Lord ended up bringing against the northern kingdom were the Assyrians, right? And they besieged the land, right? We read about that, the siege of Samaria, right? They besieged the land, ended up getting in there, breaking it down, and so on. So as he goes to describe this judgment that will come upon them, remember, Amos was just one of many other prophets, because then you have Hosea, right, that comes after Amos, and he also prophesies against the northern kingdom of the destruction to come. And yet they just don't listen. They don't take heed. So ultimately, the Lord brings his judgment. So carrying on back in the book of Amos, chapter 3, and verse 11, right, it says, and he shall bring down thy strength from thee, and thy palaces shall be spoiled. So by weakening them, right, that's how you bring down somebody's strength, right? They would starve them out, they would overpower them. And as it says, thy palaces shall be spoiled. So anything valuable in there would be taken. That includes people. And the rest would just be destroyed and broken down as casualties of war. Verse 12, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, as the shepherd taketh out of the mouth of the lion 2 legs, or a piece of an ear, so shall the children of Israel be taken out that dwell in Samaria, in the corner of a bed, and in Damascus in a couch. And what is this is to say, right? When you have a shepherd, and they take out the sheep to graze and so on, there are times when a lion or a wolf or something would come around, or a bear. And so the example being given here is like, by the time a shepherd is able to try to at least save that lamb, at best he'll probably get like some pieces of the lamb's leg or of its ear, trying to pull it from from the lion's mouth, because the lion would have already began to devour it. So the Lord likens that onto Samaria, to say that the bulk of you are going to be consumed as like a lamb in the mouth of a lion. And at very best, the what's going to be left, right, of you, those that escape of this lion's mouth, metaphorically, which is the Assyrians that are coming, would be likened onto like the ear or the legs, right? And so we do see this as when the Assyrians do come and besiege the northern kingdom, right, and they deport the bulk of them. Not every single one of them, right? Not all the Israelites of the northern kingdom were deported. Hence, when you read during the time of Zechariah, he sent, not Zechariah, Hezekiah, to keep the Passover, right? He sent out an invite to even those remnants that were in the regions of Manasseh and the other parts where you had Israelites of the northern kingdom still dwelling there. Okay. And as it mentions, them that dwell, right, in the corner of a bed, and in Damascus in a couch, this is, when you read in other translations, they really paint the image of basically living a lofty and comfortable, careless, carefree lifestyle, right? So when you hear the corner of a bed, you typically imagine like an actual bed in the corner of it, but you wonder, well, how is that a luxurious thing, right? Wouldn't the center of the bed be more luxurious, right? But not corner in that sense, more so corner in, let me see, I think it was Divan. That's it. Let's see here. Divan. There we go. I think that's what it was. No, it wasn't. There was something like that. I forgot the name of it. Yeah, there we go. A divan, which is furniture, right? But this sort of gives that image, and really something like this, right, is what I would imagine, to where that corner, right, being, or even something like this, you can imagine somebody who is living comfortably, right? They wouldn't be sitting here. When you're comfortable, you get in the corner. You put the pillows over there. You lean that arm over there, and you're resting in there comfortably. Okay, so that's like a visual you can imagine when it refers to the corner of the bed, or the in Damascus in a couch, basically living lawfully. Okay, and there's different points of view as to what this Damascus and the couch means. Is it referring to the actual people in Damascus? Is it referring to Israelites in Damascus? Is it referring to couches that were made from Damascus and Israelites dwelling on them? All in all, that's a minor detail here, because the point that's being made is that Israelites here, particularly the northern kingdom, that are living luxuriously and comfortably, meanwhile there's all this wickedness going on in the midst of them. The Lord is about to bring disaster upon them, to where what will be left will be likened unto the remains of a lamb after a lion has had its way with it. Verse 13, hear ye and testify in the house of Jacob, saith the Lord Yahweh, the God of hosts, that in the day that I shall visit the transgressions of Israel upon him, I will also visit the altars of Bethel, and the horns of the altar shall be cut off and fall to the ground. Right, and when we look up here, let's see, going back to not the timeline this time, but there were some other useful images. Hopefully there's a good map in here somewhere. Okay. Here is the Near East. Let's see if there's a more detailed one. Here we go. Here's Bethel, right? So you can see here, and this is even, look at this. Look at all this. Look at all these resources. So they even give you approximations of where and what locations these prophets were, right? So you have Tishbe over here, I think, if you zoom in a bit. Elijah, right? Tishbe, Jonah, they have him here. Elisha, Abel, Meholah, and so Amos, Tekoa, right, is where he was from. So yeah, that's real interesting. He had some of the other prophets here, Isaiah from Jerusalem, Zephaniah, Haggai, so on and so forth. So here we're dealing with Amos. And so when he's speaking against Bethel, right, which is part of the northern kingdom or Israel. And so the Lord is saying here, those altars that they built, they weren't for the Lord. All right, so all those altars, at least they weren't being used to serve the Lord, because there was a lot of idolatry going on in the northern kingdom. So he said all those altars and all that, they're also going to be destroyed when I bring this judgment upon them. And I will smite the winter house with the summer house, and the houses of ivory shall perish, and the great houses shall have an end, saith the Lord Yahweh. So now, when you think of the winter house and you think of the summer house, you can think of like when certain kings, right, or rulers that are very rich, they often have different locations, right, where they would build certain houses for different seasons, right? One example is when, like today, sometimes in the winter, people want to travel, they'll like find like a cabin somewhere, or just to get the experience over there, right? Or in the summertime, when the weather is nicer, they're not trying to find a cabin, a cabin in the woods somewhere, right? They would rather like a summer house, right? Or somewhere, like a beach house area or something like that, because the weather is nice. So similarly back then, different kings with luxury, right? They would build palaces, they would have different buildings, different places where they would dwell, at different times for their leisure, for their pleasure. But it was a sign of like luxury or riches. And so as it's saying here, the Lord said, all that is going to be gone, right? So you're out here living in your eyes good. Meanwhile, there's all this wickedness going on at your hands. What do you think is going to happen? And this is the message that the Lord has via the mouth of Amos, okay, for Israel at this time. And as we keep on going through, you'll see that it was pretty much falling on deaf ears. So when you read about the horrifics of siege, the horrifics of what ended up happening to the northern kingdom, it's not unwarranted, right? And all Israel together, right? And even just everybody in general, these judgments that the Lord brings are not unwarranted. They come upon you when you neglect the warnings that are given of the Lord. And then the Lord says, okay, there's no point in warning you anymore. Now the judgment is going to come. So anyway, with that, I'm going to end it here. Lord willing, that was edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.